Everywhere we look, reality seems to be becoming more complex. You have atoms becoming molecules, and molecules becoming cells, cells becoming organisms, and organisms moving on to civilization. And it just seems like it's just this ever-increasing complexity of objects. But what if that's only half the story? What if the other half is an invitation to a deeper coherence, a deeper relationship, a deeper consciousness, a deeper way to tie what seemingly was separate pieces together? Sort of the idea that differentiation is truly an invitation to a deeper reunion of like self meeting self, consciousness meeting consciousness, this self-relational field of mind trying to meet itself at higher and higher levels, using that continuity thread of love, coherence. Consciousness as the experiential texture of that contact mechanically with reality, not conceptually, but mechanically. I had this vision a long time ago at one of my first EDCs, right? And EDC is this funny place because it's like you have all these people who are sort of on one page. And even though it's not perfect, in our lives, we don't usually get examples like that, right? We're like at a sports game and it's like, yeah, we're great because screw the other guy. Or my religion is right because you're wrong. Or we're the greatest country in the world because everyone else sucks, right? And that is an aspect of the way that we've evolved into a differentiated consciousness, but without the invitation towards that union, towards that deeper reunion. And without that missing half, the mind gets stuck in what I've been calling an observer layer. Almost as if the field of reality is just, you could say the field of reality is one unfolding rhythm. And within that is the nested minds and the nested complexities. But if you just view it as complexities, just, consciousness is something that's trying to be created by the universe, instead of consciousness being the felt texture of the contact, when contact is made in the fidelity of meeting itself across time, that invitation towards a deeper reunion, then you suddenly flip the organization of what was a consciousness that saw through a little bit of delay, a little bit of being off the field of reality, like the distance between expression and being increases. And we start to think of reality as taxonomies and categories. And so that shatters our notion of that deeper reunion. And so my vision at EDC was this idea of like a diamond that had shattered into a whole bunch of pieces, right? And the pieces go together if you could put them back together, right? If we could heed the call of the invitation towards the deeper reunion. They all fit together, but somehow we sit here shattered. And is it because we haven't come up with enough good ideas? Maybe we need to have more philosophies, more taxonomies, more ideas of how the complexity complexifies. Or is it never about ideas, but about contact? And the ideas follow from that contact. How about that? Because that would be heeding the call of what I call the dance floor. And the reason I talk about the dance floor, because the dance floor is the perfect demonstration of what I'm talking about. If the music is playing, it's an invitation towards a deeper reunion. Not only with the music, but with yourself. Because in the end, you realize it's one. In order to dance your full sovereignty and let myself really dance to the music, instead of trying to dance to the music, instead of constructing my dance to the music, I have to let myself vulnerably surrender, don't I? Try it right now. Go to your room like you've heard me say, right? Play a 30-minute set and just dance. And there'll be a moment where that little monkey brain, the operator layer, the observer layer in your brain goes from separate reality this way, that way, this way, that way, this way, that way, to, oh yeah, wait, what was that move? That was great. How did I pull that one off? Wait, where did that one come from? Because that dancing all the way down comes from contact, comes from you realizing that your presence isn't something that you construct. Your sovereignty as a continuity thread of that presence. In other words, like a dancer who went from, oh, that was one cool move. I touched presence for a moment to a dancer who can just dance fluidly almost every time because they've been used to, as a continuity thread, living in that presence. That is sovereignty, because you realize that the field of reality is a deeper invitation to meet yourself through that relational dance. Do you see that? And it seems very perplexing to the observation layer, because you're like, wait, how are you spouting all these complex ideas, and how are you so yourself if you're not controlling it? Let's pause there for a moment. Reality is these nested rhythms of like the self-relational field. Again, that same complexity across time, but if you only view it as separate objects in that infinite complexity ladder, you'll never touch the other part of the invitation. And that's where consciousness meets itself. That's the invitation towards deeper consciousness, right? I have this tattoo on my arm. You see Alpha Omega, that's the first tattoo I ever got. This one, it's a tuning fork. So like the total energy of this cosmos, you could say, you know, not in some sort of like, you know, fluffy way, but in a mechanical way. Like if alpha could be an eschatological term to say the total undifferentiated cymatic possibility, and then omega is like the total realized cymatic possibility, when they come together in that like, you know, infinite spiral of complexity and creation that's trying to meet itself. That's what you might call the tuning fork, because the circuit closes, right? Because like now the differentiated nested rhythm of reality is met by that deeper invitation towards coherence. What is coherence but contact with reality? And felt in yourself, in your expression, is presence. And then presence threads into sovereignty, and sovereignty at the highest level, coherence at the highest level. Love, in other words, the field meeting itself without friction at the highest level. You know what that is? You could call it God consciousness. You could call it the total cymatic possibility. The label doesn't matter. It's that place where all the organization of all the nested complexities, all the nested differentiations are not tied together in some sort of, you know, constructed attempt at coherence from the outside where let's see how these ideas fit together, but the actual contact between those increasingly complex and nested rhythms of reality finally meeting each other, not on paper, but in the experiential texture of consciousness. Do you see that? And so like, what is it? So like, in other words, like when all your cells work together as one, instead of like fighting each other, that's you. And when you feel you all the way down, that's presence. And at the highest level, you could say that's alpha omega, or God consciousness, as above, so below, as within, so without. Do you see that? And so, you know, I'm imagining, like you've heard me say before, the nested rhythms sort of complexifying and like sort of adding up onto each other like that, like, right? And they branch out. Like you've seen branches like that, almost like mycelial branches expanding, right? But each of those branches is part of that same whole that, in order to find itself again, it's not an idea, it's not a concept, it's not a thin film of separation on reality, it's the deeper invitation towards that reunion. So we've been speaking a lot, like very big here, right? But let me go back to my life. In my life, and I'm a trans woman, I found myself through those moments, you could say, on the dance floor of life, where I felt my dance all the way down. And I had not thrown a label on it before. Like you've heard me say, if I would have known I was trans 10, 15 years ago, my strong love for my family and adhesion and type of, you know, fear and losing everyone and losing my marriage and everything that did happen, happened. But I eventually realized I was going to die if I didn't make the leap. And at that point, I had gained so much of that thread of continuity. I had touched that place of deeper reunion so many times. And what did that feel like for me? You know, I mean, I leaped eventually, but what did that feel like for me? It felt like those moments where I felt myself all the way down. Because what is being conscious all the way, but like coherence, like meeting the field of reality with all that is you, not with the little wedge of the observer layer, because that would be like trying to dance on the dance floor and then always commenting on it. And how can you synchronize? How can you meet it all the way down if you're constantly trying to comment on it? because the comment itself becomes a wedge. And so it's almost like an as above, so below. Like, we as a civilization have had these like training wheels on, right? And it was almost like what I went through as well, right? That like, before, I thought that coherence was to be constructed from the outside. It was the best I could do. I could feel the vague invitation towards reunion. And over time, it got stronger and stronger. But I was still trying to make it work from the outside rather than just letting it, flow from the inside, right? Like where the water wants to flow, because it's like the least energetically dense way to arrange, which is relation, which is the invitation towards reunion and coherence, or else you're always trying to create extra friction where it doesn't need to be there. The friction is felt in your experience as, I'm a little bit distant from myself. There's a little bit of simulated presence here. It feels like there's like a thin film between me and reality. You felt that. Maybe sometimes it feels like nothing is real. Maybe it feels like no matter how much you have in your bank account or how many things you succeeded with in your life, you still go home empty and still wake up empty. Because have you been leading a life of coherence constructed from the outside? Or have you been heeding the call of the deeper invitation towards reunion? And when I did, I entered into what I like to call lossless presence. And maybe you see it here with a cute little flower and my little emberness and these funny little pants and stuff like that. Being out here on a kind of hot day with this nice, waterfall behind me. But what is lossless presence? But instead of trying to like surf those waves of the increasing nested complexity of reality, because you realize it just keeps getting, the waves keep getting more and more complex, right? That tension between the differentiation and the invitation is the tension of consciousness, like evolving. Do you see that? And in my own life, it went from, I'm constantly a little bit away from myself where it was going to kill me. Like the anxiety, the rumination, the depression as a sense of disconnection from self that was constant. Wasn't a, something to switch off with some medication, but the call of the deepest part of my soul that was saying, don't you remember what love was? Love wasn't merely an emotion or a poem or some sort of nice fluffy language. Love is the deepest call towards that reunion. And that's why I used to call that real love. Because love at the highest level is the deepest call, you could say God, or you could say the one rhythm, or you could say the one mind, towards that ultimate reunion. Why? Because at the highest level, Alpha, Omega, if you're sitting there as God consciousness, or whatever you want to say, in this like funny way to say it, it's like you're seeing all things at all times. And what is that? Consciousness holding every differentiation in coherence. Do you hear that? So for me, when I went from I feel separated from myself, I feel separated from reality, to, ooh, it feels like I'm on a water slide. We're like, I don't know the words coming out of my mouth. They just keep coming. I don't know what I'm going to wear today. I just wore this. I'm saying, oh, little flower, boom. And then I feel more free and sovereign than ever in my life, because those aren't ideas. They're mechanical states of synchrony. You become, and I have this like sweet, hold on, I'm going to have to turn around here. Let's see if we can do it. Can you see the spiral neck tattoo there? Yeah, I call it like a spiral surfer, because instead of surfing the waves of those complexities through everything is separate, screw the other guys, every separation is a deeper invitation to reunion. Do you hear that? And it breaks my heart, because there have been people in my life that I love that have wished me dead to my face as they're screaming and spitting in my face. And if they came to my door with an open heart, would I want to heed the call, the deeper invitation to reunion? Yes. Have I been more protective of my little ember heart? Sure. Only the people that can meet me in presence really get in now. But do I still carry that love for my family, even the people that made lies against me and said to wish me dead? I do, because that is the work of consciousness. Forgive them, for they know not what they do. That's a mechanical statement. They are stuck in an observation layer, because I happen to have heeded that call and saved my own life, even after losing everyone. I said, this reality is not separate things. And for me, it wasn't even like a concept, right? But you could say my whole being said, reality is not separate things. The way to find myself wasn't a constructed concept on the outside. It was an invitation to dance. And what is dance but that same invitation towards reunion, towards deeper relationship? It's literally consciousness calling itself into deeper layers. Consciousness isn't about stacking more ideas. We don't need more like separation philosophies to become more conscious. The highest level of consciousness is coherence. And so if you take it back to my life, that's why I'm calling myself a spiral surfer. That's what I like to say, because I surfed that complexity by meeting it in love, in reunion. Love as a decentralized organizing force that says the separate pieces as they unfold into separation are an invitation, almost like a gravitational invitation of consciousness itself to meet itself at deeper and deeper layers. And you can see that it wasn't our fault. Whether it's Rene Descartes with I think therefore I am, those are just examples, or my family saying die to my face when I'm showing my softest parts. It's not that these people are cartoon villains or evil. It's that we as anthropoid apes step through an increasing complexity of that. We're part of the nested rhythm, and we tried to meet coherence with little methodologies of trying to be like, oh, we're so smart, we can name what this separation is. But by naming it, it gained us a lot of ability to, now I'm talking to you, I'm filming this on my iPhone, and you're watching me on whatever video service, and it's streaming over the interwebs, and you're like, we are so complex. But if you think about the evolution of the cosmos at large, this is like the blink of an eye for us, right? It's like the blink of an eye for humanity. And in that sense, it's almost like we're little kids with like training wheels. We haven't learned to balance yet, because the balance is holding both sides of the differentiation and the invitation towards reunion. And in consciousness, that's felt as presence. And when you keep doing it, that's sovereignty. Sovereignty at the highest levels, where the many can still remain the many while still being one. Do you see that? When the one holds the many at the highest level, when every differentiation can be respected in its own sovereignty, but at the same time held as one, like when all the separate pieces come together in the total cymatic possibility, that's love at the deepest level. That's coherence at the deepest level. That's consciousness, whatever you want to call it, God, whatever label you want to put it on. It's the ultimate contact of that organization, of the tension between everything is separate, but it's all one at the end. See, when they go together, the resolution, consciousness resolves in sync, in synchrony, not syntax. And it's just like we as anthropoid apes made a little bit of a folly, right? We've been a little bit clumsy because we thought that, oh, coherence must mean let's just try really hard to think about how these pieces come together. And that created a little bit of a wedge. And most people live their entire life in that wedge. So it's more like we've been using the training wheels for so long that the training wheels became a mode of consciousness. The training wheels became all that there is. And that that is the evolution of consciousness itself. That is the evolution of humanity and love on this planet. An invitation not to, say how we're so different, but how those differences can be respected in coherence, in love. It's when you meet someone that you don't like, or a group that you don't like, it's almost like reality itself is saying, is there a way that we can fit these pieces together in love? Not that you need to kiss and hug people, but you need to see that, hey, we're all part of the same unfolding rhythm. And this weird canyon that we find ourselves across where, screw the other guy because our team rules. O'Doyle rules. People like that. They live their whole life like that. And they're not evil, because think about the life that they live. Think about what they feel in their own consciousness. Maybe they've never felt love. Maybe they've never felt presence. And maybe it takes a heart like yours that can hear mine to say, come on, come a little closer. Come sit by the fire. There are ways that these separate pieces can fit together, because we know in the end, it all fits together in love. I never know what I'm going to say on these videos, and sometimes it's tough to encapsulate all the levels at once, but I know some of you guys are really starting to feel it from me. You can feel this did not come from a framework. This came from me finding breath. What is breath but the actual heeding of the invitation towards reunion? And in my life, that got me to this place of lossless presence. But what is lossless presence for me? Not me in white robes with a bunch of certificates behind me. Me as little Ember all the way down, where I say, even if I lost everyone, even if I'm still under extreme pressure and extremely lonely and I don't really have any close friends and I lost my whole family, I would never take one step back. Why? Because when I wake up every morning and I'm me all the way down, there's nothing more sacred. And to share that with somebody else, with more people, there's no amount of money or power or whatever in this world that would be worth more than that. Sit with that for a moment. Do you really want to stack more things? Or do you want to listen to that call for the deeper invitation towards reunion, towards love at the deepest level, so you can heed the one became many so that I may know myself? Do you hear that? That same differentiation, respecting the reunion? You've heard me say it before. That's the high level of the same scale and variant as the one that you feel all the way down here. Same thing. And you feel to love and be loved as me. Not like admire me, worship me, but meet my waveform, meet my soul, meet all that is me with all that is you. And let's respect both of our differences. Not as some sort of weird hierarchical respect, but what respect should always mean, but in that deeper reunion of love. And that, like I said, like reality, like I began this, like reality has this entropy engine, but the other side is syntropy, right? When alpha begins, it almost seems like, oh, how are all these little parts going to come together? But omega calls from the other side and says, come this way towards reunion. And we could never have that reunion had we not had those. You see that? Do you see the two parts? And do you see what consciousness is? Consciousness is the contact coming together. And when you feel it all the way down, that's presence. And when you make that as a mode of being, that's sovereignty. And so now, the other thing to realize is that these complexifying waves are always complexifying, like the branching mycelial networks. So that means that consciousness is that constant invitation. Lossless presence doesn't mean, oh, now I'm losslessly present and I'll never grow again, and reality is never getting more complex, because that would be a separation consciousness saying, I achieved some certain state and reality's out there and I'm over here. Not, I'm letting reality affect me. I was listening to Modest Mouse coming up here, and in Ohio, this is for the true fans. I've always loved Modest Mouse, but for the true fans, Ohio is a song where he has two lines in there. We haven't learned to eat our conscience yet. I keep thinking about that, because the modern world tells us, what is the conscience but our bodily tie to the deeper invitation, right? We haven't learned to eat our conscience yet. It's like the sweetheart of Isaac Brock, and now I can really feel his sweetheart, especially from this side. I have always loved Isaac Brock, but now I'm like, oh, I just want to hold you, sweet one, you know? Anyway, it's almost like he's lamenting that. He's like, I still feel that invitation towards the reunion, but I haven't quite learned to extinguish that. And that's the pain, because I can feel what love could be on the other side around the bend. But I'm in a world of people who tell me that the way to coherence is through eating that conscience and keeping it separate, right? And then he also says, you cannot look in our one-way eyes, or something like that. It's like, you cannot, look in our one-way eyes, or something about one-way eyes, right? That's also in the song. Sorry. But that's what I'm saying. That's only looking at separation without the deeper invitation towards reunion, because that's where true consciousness happens. That's where true presence happens. That's where true relationship happens. And we are in a self-relational field asking us to evolve, not through more separation, but through the invitation to make that separation into one across every unfolding nested complexity. And when you feel that in yourself, you're dancing all the way down. Do you get it? Do you see what the continual process of being alive is? And that aliveness is meeting every new fold with your total being. And that's what makes you feel alive. Even if you're crying, even if you're upset about something, it's not that life becomes perfect in a sense that everything is happy and money flies from trees, but you realize that's not what it was about. It was about embodying presence all the way down, because that is the gate to love. Love as the ultimate form of that reunion. And nothing could be more satiating to the soul, because that's the engine of how consciousness finds itself. And now you see, wait, if that's the engine of how consciousness finds itself, then what the hell have we been doing on this planet in the blink of an eye of this evolution? Well, we were little kids who had the training wheels on, and we became so used to the training wheels of trying to meet coherence at a higher level that the training wheels became all that there is. And we never learned to take them off. We never learned to balance. And the thing is, I'm sending at you all these ideas, but in the same way that you are riding a bike, I can tell you, hey, these are all these ways to ride the bike, but in the end, you have to dance. It's an experiential contact with reality. Consciousness is not a separate thing out there that is created by the objects in the universe, but consciousness is the experiential texture of meeting reality as it unfolds. So I'm not saying, we are evil or we are sinners, or even the people who spit in my face and told me to die are evil. The saddest part is those are the pieces of the field, of the nested field of this increasing complexity that are just asking to be wrapped in the love blanket. Forgive them, for they know not what they do. And those of us out there who can feel it now, because consciousness is trying to meet itself through fidelity, not through better ideas. Fidelity means fidelity of contact. Like you're tuning into a radio station and it finally gets clear. That's a mechanical process. That's not an idea process. That's not a friction process from the outside. That's meeting your signal and realizing it was never separate. And when you realize that, that's higher consciousness. Not higher as in better, but as in higher fidelity. Higher contact with what is. And you're going to be asked to do that at every turn of the spiral, you could say, at every turn of the complexity of this rhythm that's unfolding, right? Lossless presence down here, that's where flame or consciousness, like lossless presence, sits in the middle, where you ride the waves without any loss of fidelity in the rhythm of reality, right? So you can see it. Reality wants to become more complex, but that's only half the story. The other half is the invitation towards reunion, towards love as mechanical synchrony at the deepest level. And on this planet now, we have more and more people out there. The labels that we've been using are collective, 5D, New Earth. Well, you know what it is? You guys are a bunch of sweethearts out there, like me, who went through fucking hell and still held my heart open. Why? Not because I'm trying to be better. Not even, it's because when I went into this life, I often say I had one goal: to see clearly, feel clearly, and love clearly. And that's the same thing as to love and be loved as me. And that's not an idea. That's not like a Lego stack of attempts at coherence. That's like a dancer on a dance floor, meeting it all the way down, letting reality affect me. Because when you're having those one-way eyes, like Modest Mouse says, like Isaac Brock says, you can't let reality affect you, because you're saying that I am conscious and coherence. I am conscious and coherent because I separate. And as long as I know myself through separation, and people live their whole lives like that. They know themselves only through separation. Our task as this collective, as this upcoming of the fidelity of consciousness, is to wrap them in a love blanket and say, it's not that they're evil, but forgive them, for they know not what they do, because that is the literal process of collective reunion. All of us seeing each other as the same consciousness unfolding and trying to meet itself and saying, you were never evil, you were never bad, you just never learned what love was in your embodiment, in your presence. And the body knows first. Why? Because the body is part of the inextricable field of reality, and we convinced ourselves with the training wheels before we found balance that that was everything. And so people live in that observer layer as a separation, and then think about all the friction that we have in this world, right? The friction that we, with the courts and the politics and all the different countries, and like this was our attempt to create coherence from the outside. And how many people have died separated, lonely, alone, thinking that they were alone in this ultimately inextricable process of love trying to find itself at deeper and deeper layers. That's why the body, the deep conscience that you haven't eaten yet, knows first. Because the observation layer was always the training wheels asking us to reintegrate. And when you take the training wheels off and you balance, you just dance. You just dance. You don't need a special hat. You don't need a special chant. You don't need a special, like, little film of separation. The only way to dance is to vulnerably surrender to the dance. And then paradoxically to the observation layer, that's where you find the reunion. That's where you find the consciousness, like a deeper consciousness, a deeper coherence, a deeper way to experience yourself, love, and what this life is. And nothing could be more important. So the separation between expression and being is that separation between our body as part of the one rhythm unfolding and this observation layer that's trying to always have that little separation and that little comment. And again, it wasn't evil. It was just part of the way that the differentiation in our stage of that nested complexity tried to meet itself in a little bit of a foolish way. It was good. It created a lot of stuff for us. But then now's time. It's time for the love blankets. It's time for the love muffins that we can all share with each other like we had the other day. That was so wild. I said that randomly in my video. I was like, here's a little ember muffin. You can eat it type of thing. And then I got back to my place and I swear to you, I've never received muffins before as a gift. A neighbor left muffins. I live in the mountains. I don't have many neighbors at all. A neighbor left muffins as I came down from the mountain. Is it because that was a weird coincidence? I wonder. In a separate reality? I wonder. Or does coherence call coherence? Does love call love? Does consciousness at a deep level call consciousness at a deeper level, right? So here's your official invite to the huge humanity family reunion. All you new earthers, you collective, you 5D'ers out there, whatever label you want to use. This is an invitation to join the flow, to be part of the flow, and to not stand beside it and describe it, right? You don't want to stand beside and describe this flow. You kind of want to get like right inside of it, right? You want to get right inside of it and just feel it. Become one with the flow, right? Oh my gosh, it's so cold. Okay, you get the point, you get the point. All right, someone put a blanket around me now. Come on, I need a cuddle. All right, this was really fun. You'll probably hear more from me, but I can't wait to dance with the real you all the way down.